And I said, if I were operating on you, would you want me to not wear my mask? Crickets. I said, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I'm so glad I got to see you today. And I walked away from him.
Welcome to another episode of What Do We Do Next, a podcast that is hoping to give you some hope, some empowerment, and a silver lining in this mess of a world that we're living in. I'm excited to welcome to the show Dr. Margaret Cochran. She's a transpersonal psychologist, licensed clinical social worker, life coach, hypnotherapist, educator, and author with over 25 years of clinical experience. A seasoned professional dedicated to the health and well-being of her patients, Dr. Cochran adopts a holistic approach to mental health and wellness. She seamlessly integrates traditional ego psychology, transpersonal psychology, and energy psychology, providing her patients with every tool necessary to achieve their goals and realize their dreams. She's been featured in numerous outlets across the country, including the BBC, ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox affiliates, CBS, and Healthline, Yahoo Health, or Yahoo Life, Total Beauty, Mutiny's Group, Mercury News, and many, many others. So she's legit, in case you're wondering. In addition to contributing to the Huffington Post, she's a regular presence on NBC Sacramento's morning show and has hosted radio programs such as Wisdom, Love, and Magic, and A Mental Health Moment. Dr. Cochran is also the author of several books, including What Are You Afraid Of? So welcome to the show today. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I wish we were going to talk about something lighthearted and fun, like our next vacation. But today we're going to talk about cults and how people get into them and how they get out of them and everything else that a lot of us are dealing with right now. So let's get right into it. How do people end up in cults? How does this happen?
Well, it's often believed that people who get into cults are not very intelligent or they're naive or something like that. But actually, the clinical literature shows us that most of the people in cults have an undergraduate degree or higher. They're very idealistic people. They're looking for answers, and they're looking to help and make the world a better place. They just put their confidence in something that gives a simplistic answer to much more complicated issues. And that's where they get tripped up.
I appreciate that because, you kind of look at things like QAnon and like, those people really meant well when they thought they were catching the underground ring at Comet Pizza that has no basement. But, they certainly cause more harm than good. What kinds of people? Well, you said they're typically educated, but what are people really looking for when they find themselves in a cult-like situation?
Salvation and control. The truth is that we have no control over the world. We don't. Everything's uncertain. Everything's unknown. Here we are in this planet spinning in the world and in the universe, and we got no idea what's going on. So since there have been people, there have been cults. Sometimes they're called political parties. Sometimes they're called religions. Sometimes they're called, the rule is mine is a religion, yours is a cult. That's the perspective. Or mine's a religion, yours is a mythology, right? So the attraction of absolute brightness, absolute surety is something that people are often seduced by, because they want to find control. And they also want to just live their lives. So if I invest in this and it's going to solve the problem for me, again, that works well politically. If I invest in this political party and they're going to solve all the problems, all I have to do is take my kids to soccer, go to the store, go to work every day, then I'm good. The other thing that cults do is they very much promote the idea of us and them. So there are people who are outside the cult and people who are inside the cult. The ones outside are evil or heretical or whatever, and the people inside the cults are the true believers. Now, what's so fascinating, I think, there are many fascinating things about cults, but one of the things that's fascinating about it is if a cult leader makes a prediction and there's an error or something goes wrong, people don't question the leader. They just assume that, oh, well, there's a miscalculation. or, the earth didn't spin quite right. So the numbers were off or whatever it is, right? But there's some reason why the cult leader is still okay. Because if I let go of that cult and I have to look at my choices and what the cult has done to the greater culture, I don't think I could survive that.
It's pretty interesting. I got a little bit obsessed with not cults per se, but like Scientology and Mormonism, which is like, I realize that's wildly inappropriate, but they're very similar in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah, that's not wildly inappropriate at all. There are certain rules. There's a charismatic leader of some kind who has all the answers. And then there's this process of indoctrination that happens. And then there are requests made of the cult members. Sometimes they're sexual. Sometimes they're financial. Sometimes they're, you have to believe that certain others are so bad they deserve to die, et cetera, et cetera. So once you have those things put together and you have been indoctrinated into the cult, then you don't think anything about, going out and doing those things. Charles Manson cult was a good example of that.
I was just going to say, yeah, those
he was
girls.
predicting this huge race war, apocalyptic race war, he called it, that was coming. And so, a lot of drugs, a lot of, stuff. The other thing that is important is the isolation that happens, because there's this, honeymoon period where there's friendship and shelter and a sense of conviviality and community. And then comes the social emotional starvation, the isolation, and often, the cult is physically isolated. So they're in a part of the world in their own little enclave, and there's no outside. They don't have cell phones. They don't have, interaction with anybody. So this is all you know. Rather like the way North Korea is set up.
Well, interestingly enough, Costa Rica is rife with cults, and I think it's because of the lack of regulation. There's just not a lot of police and stuff here. It takes a long time to get caught doing anything. They got their hands full. And I think it's like you said, you're disconnected. You're like, you're not on your phone. You don't know what's going on. And there's actually a cult very close to my house. It's been in existence for quite some time. And you can't find any information about them at all, which is fascinating because you can Google every single thing, and you can't find anything. Yet they have multiple compounds in a very rural area. And, it's a very strange group. They wear all white and they wear giant ankhs under their shirts, like these wooden ankhs, almost like crucifixes. We think they're from Germany or something. It's really hard to tell where they're from, but that isolation is real.
Mormons wear sacred underwear. I mean,
right.
And Catholics have their little things that they do. Right. And, in that particular, that usually the differentiation between a religion and a cult, how it kind of all plays out, is religions are big enough to absorb the nasty. Cults don't have enough people, and when something really bad happens, the cult usually splits up or comes down to just a fringe again. But a religion, they can absorb lying, cheating, sexual abuse, all kinds of awful things. And it also works for political parties. If I'm big enough and I have enough money, then I'm going to do what I call the Wizard of Oz gambit. Oh, don't look over here. Look over here. Look over here. Pay attention to this. We're going to maybe have a war. So the fact that everyone's angry with me and my poll numbers are plummeting, don't notice that. Look at this over here.
Look at the
and I'll tell you in 2 weeks what I've decided to do, so you can be on tender hooks. Now let's talk about why that's important, because that's super, super important. The brain, I'm a brain girl. I self-confessed. It's true. The brain is kind of a kludge. It has a lot of different parts to it. And, what's so fascinating to me is the human brain has not substantially evolved in the last 10,000 years. Now think about that. We got 10,000-year-old technology, 21st century problems. What could go wrong? So if I'm a cult person, I am narcissistic, I'm unethical, and I want power. Now, to get you on board, what I want to do is appeal to a part of your brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is there are two little guys back here, they're almond shaped. And that's kind of your emotional center. So my basic tactic is, I'm going to scare the pants off you, then tell you I love you, and then tell you I'll fix it. I gotcha. You're mine. And anybody who comes along says, that woman's crazy. She's talking crazy stuff. How dare you say that? How dare you say that about this loving, wonderful woman who just wants to make the world better? They're out there. They're the evil ones. She's our savior. You should listen to her. Come to one of our meetings. We'd love to have you.
So how do we address what's going on? Because I think, like, you know, in my life, I've never been so, like, politically divided. I remember having a panic attack when I thought Bush was going to get elected in the 90s or whatever. And now I saw something about George Bush and I was like, oh, I wonder how he's doing. And I'm like, wow, what a Twilight Zone that, like, I now like George Bush. You know what I mean? Like, that's how far down the road. I'm like, I'd give anything for George Bush to come back. You know what I mean?
George Bush said that. If you recall, he made a comment in an interview. He said, I'm looking pretty good to you now, aren't I?
Yeah, which is terrible.
He knows.
It's absolutely terrible. But I've never felt like so divided before. But now, and I never would have imagined in my life saying, oh, you're in a cult because you didn't vote like me. Right? It almost feels silly, like a real reach. But now we're at a point where, like, no, I really do believe that a lot of people are in this Trump cult. And I don't think there's a single person listening who doesn't have a family member, a friend, an employee or coworker or whatever that is in that cult. And so how do we start to address this? What do we do next? Pardon the pun.
Good of you to bring that in. I love that. Okay. So here's the deal. Our country now looks like Nazi Germany in the 30s. Basically. Sure, or the Civil War in the 1860s. Same kind of division. Brother against brother, father against son, that kind of thing. And what's happened is that the people involved have so skillfully wound people up into fear that true to cult form, I can ask you to do anything. Trump once said, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and my admirers wouldn't care. And he may be right in some cases. So once somebody has a hold of you like that, then it doesn't matter what begins to slip away. Your belief is, but it's for the greater good. Something good's going to come of this. This is really a positive thing. It's the sunk cost fallacy where, I put so much time into this, I can't think another way. And besides, it's going to be all right. Somehow magically, all that's going to, turn into something good. The fact that we want to control women's bodies, or we hate people of different races, or, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or different countries who have a different economic philosophy.
Right.
That's okay and worth it because it's going to be a great thing. Even in England right now, where they had, this is the 10-year anniversary of Brexit. Mm-hmm. And they did a survey. People would still vote to leave, even though the economy's tanked. Because for them, the idea of sovereignty was everything. Now, part of the difficulty we have is that our schools are not set up to teach critical thinking. They're set up to create workers, not innovators. And that needs to change. I used to do, when I was a teacher years ago, I used to do a little unit with my kids where I'd have them watch commercials, and then they'd come back and report on the commercial and talk about whether they thought it was true or not. And I had this one little guy, he was adorable. He did one of those commercials where there's a slender woman, she's in these giant pants, and the pants are pulled away from her waist. I lost 1 zillion pounds taking pink pills. And so he gets up in the front of the class and he describes this and he says, do you think that lady really ever wore those pants? I don't think so. He was great. But he was explaining to the class how they had used those pictures to make you think that, even though they didn't explain how the pink pills worked. And that's really what I used to talk to my kids about is, okay, if someone says that somebody has weapons of mass destruction, show me the proof. And if you tell me it's top secret, I toss out your argument entirely. No, you show me the proof. If I'm going to put boots on the ground, if I'm going to potentially sacrifice my husband or my children,
Right.
or my wife, or my lover, no, you show me the proof. But if I have a hold of your amygdala, you'll just say, yes, great leader, whatever you want to do.
So how do we unhook all these amygdalas? And when does that change? When it comes home to roost? Because, I mean, you've even seen in great cults, in the history of the world, or infamous cults in the history of the world where people were being killed or being murdered in front of them and they still justified it, right? So like, how do we unhijack those brains? Or is it not even possible? Do we give up? Do we just wait for them to come around? Do we like give them mushrooms and send them into the woods for 12 hours? Like how do we get them out of this thing?
Well, the mushrooms could actually work.
I know, it's kind of like
along with MDMA, which promotes dopamine reuptake and gives you a feeling of connection with others. But that aside, let's talk about a couple of cults. Let's talk about the Salem witch trials. You know how that ended? Someone finally accused the governor's wife.
Right.
And the governor put a stop to it. But it had to get all the way to the top. Another one, part of cultism are three defenses: denial, rationalization, and minimization. Denial being a big one. Okay. So it was someone else's problem until the governor's wife got accused. Let's take McCarthyism. Joe McCarthy in the 1950s, the big Red Scare, and there was communism everywhere. He ruined lives and careers and all kinds of horrible things. And what took him down was they televised his hearings. And people started to see what he was doing, what his technique was. And finally, he attacked the U.S. Army, and that was the end of him. He was censured by the Senate. So what it takes is consequences that are brought home, like I lost my family farm. I can't pay my bills anymore. All those promises about the groceries, they're not true. Oh, and the other thing that's so interesting about people, we crave connection, don't we? We're social animals. We want to be with other people. So you'll hear people say, well, we have Native Americans, our community, and they're lovely people. Now, those Native Americans are enemies. Our Native Americans are okay. I didn't think you were going to round up our Hispanic people. You were going to round up criminals. I didn't think you were going to take children and let them die because they can't get medicine. You were going to, what happened? I didn't vote for that. You probably heard that a lot. I didn't vote for that because they were so caught up in the rhetoric and they had their amygdala around their little finger that they didn't pay attention to the lady who was wearing the pants that she never wore.
Right.
With pink pills that don't work.
So when you have somebody in your life that you care enough about to try to stick around, and you see a crack in the window like that, like I didn't vote for that, but they're still on the Trump train. What's the best way to handle that? What do you do when you see a window like that? Or do you just sit back and, how do we navigate this? Because a lot of us have family members, and some are too old and not going to live long enough to change their minds. But other people have cousins or brothers or sisters or husbands or wives even. If you see a little crack in the window, or a crack in the door, how do we kick it all the way down?
Well, it depends on a number of factors, of course. What your relationship was like with the person prior to their indoctrination, that has an effect. The other is how socially isolated the person is. Mm-hmm. So another form of cult is domestic violence. People get in and they think they can't get out, right? And they'll say, I can't leave him because he loves me so much. And it's usually him. Okay, so what you do is you get the person away as much as you can from other people who talk like that. Mm-hmm. Take them to other events. Take them to a church that doesn't talk that way, if they're religious. Take them to events where there are many different kinds of people enjoying themselves and being good to one another. And you don't have to say a lot. Just keep giving them that visual feedback that, oh, the world doesn't look like what I'm being told it looks like. They're not criminals raping and stealing everywhere. And make quiet comments like maybe you're shopping with your mom who's very involved in the Trump cult. Boy, the price of eggs just hasn't gone down. Now, the comeback, depending on how deeply she has been involved, will be, well, the price has come down. The store is just overcharging. Because the great leader can't possibly have lied to us. It has to be, from the outside. And so you remain very neutral. Well, I suppose that's a possibility, but I don't accept that. I don't think the price of eggs have come down. And use that phrase. I don't accept that. I don't accept you, not you're wrong. Because if you scold, if you cajole, if you do this, you just strengthen it. You just make them more adherent to whatever their belief system is. So exposure to outside activities, exposure to kind people. Also, another good technique is remind them of days gone by. Oh, remember Christmas and da-da-da-da when, we had such a wonderful time together and it was so loving. And this is what the world was like then. And wasn't that nice? And, things like that. Memories, positive memories. Music, believe it or not, music from times gone by when things were better is very effective. In fact, it's interesting that in the human brain, music is one of the last things to go if we become demented. And so when people are in memory care units, the studies show us that if we play the music from their youth, their blood pressure goes down, their energy goes up, they feel more positive, it affects their depression. So music can be very powerful in bringing people back to a time before the craziness. And then gentle, tiny invitations like the price of eggs, or I wonder what's going to happen, or how do you suppose they figure out who the criminals are? It seems like they've just kind of taken everybody. How do you think they do that? And they may not have an answer for you, but you planted a seed. You planted the seed of doubt. So we're not going to actually be able to kick that door open, but we might be able to do this. But we have to be really consistent and very loving and not confrontive. Because confirmation bias is something that the brain does when it gets worried. So a delusion is a belief system with a kernel of truth in the center of it. Okay, so if I'm involved in a political delusion or religious delusion, whatever it is, you say something and I will find anything that I can attach to that kernel of truth and say, see, you're wrong. It is this way. So that's why arguing won't work. That's why trying to convince won't work or cajole won't work. Just gentle exposure, music, kindness, talk, and avoid, if you can, limit their isolation time because they often end up listening to programs and shows that reinforce those ideas, giving them opportunities, to go to concerts, to get out in the world and see a greater world again.
It's really interesting because this whole time I've been thinking about how similar this is to domestic abuse for sure. It's like it's the exact same, right? Like pattern and hijacking and, terrify you, then fix it and terrify you and fix it, that whole routine. And when thinking about, in my own experience, the one thing that has I called somebody in my life recently, and I was really nervous. I was really scared and afraid, fearful for the world and just everything that was happening. And I was dismissed aggressively, and it was really, really painful.
Yeah.
But when I called and I was fearful for something that was happening to me, I was given a completely opposite response. And I was shown empathy, and I was shown... And then after that, a conversation was able to take place where a door was opened, you know, where I don't understand X. And then that to me was an opportunity to explain it. But it's just interesting because when I was worried about what was happening to other people, I was dismissed so aggressively that it caused a really big problem.
Yeah. And that's why I say personalize, personalize, personalize. Bring it back to the relationship with yourself. Bring it back to relationship with other positive people. And that's what's going to soften those hard edges. But if the person is constantly being, like in World War II, there was Radio Free Europe, right? There are places that people in occupied countries could get information outside of the Axis, which was vital. And the other thing is just, it doesn't hurt to do a little resistance as well. Do what you can with your vote. Do what you can with protesting. Keep yourself safe, but do that. And the other thing that cults can't fight is kindness. If you were kind, if you were compassionate, they can't fight that. I was accosted one time in a parking lot during COVID. And I had my mask on, and this man comes up to me and he says, "Masks don't work. Why are you wearing a mask?" Really angry, puffed up all big. And so I did what I teach my patients to do. I said nothing, and I counted 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. And then I said, would you repeat that for me, please? He said, "Well, why are you wearing a mask?" 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. "Well, I'm Dr. Margaret Cochran, and one of the things I do is hypnotic anesthesia in the operating room. I put people to sleep with hypnosis." He said, "Really? You do that? You can do that?" I said, Yeah, I do that." He said, "Wow." And I said, "If I were operating on you, would you want me to not wear my mask?" Crickets. I said, "It's been a pleasure talking with you. I'm so glad I got to see you today." And I walked away from him. Now, I know that man was changed. What he was really screaming about is, "I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm out of control. I want to believe in this man," who was in office at the time, who said, "Oh, there's no problem. It's going to be gone by spring," and blah, blah, blah. I want to believe that so badly that I will attack anyone who reminds me with a mask that we're still in trouble.
That's what it is. I had this conversation with my best friend, Joshua Giamichael. He's really smart. We were talking about flat earthers and how really it's just like a belief that there's a simple answer to something that's not simple at all. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you go against that, you're just rattling their entire world, like their whole universe.
Literally their world. Yes.
Literally their topsy-turvy world. But I mean, I think that's exactly it, and I had a really interesting conversation with somebody the other day. I woke up and I saw about this lawmaker from Montana who had said a really horrible thing after the 2 people were murdered last weekend in their homes.
It was awful.
And he said something really ignorant and hateful, and somebody posted his phone number and email address, so I called, because that's what I do now. I'm channeling my energy. And I was pretty angry with him, but I kept it mostly under wraps. He stayed on the phone with me for an hour and 15 minutes. He immediately took accountability. He immediately admitted that he was wrong. But then he also said some other things to me that were, that I was like, come on, like, but he allowed me the opportunity to have that conversation. I said, "Do you really believe that?" You know what I mean? Let's really logically look at this for a second. Do you really think people need to be paid because they're losing their health care? Like, because they're upset they're losing their health care? Like, I mean, like, and just like you said, prove it. 12 million people got paid to protest. Show me one Venmo, one Cash App, one PayPal receipt. Show me the evidence. You know what I mean? Show me the evidence.
Exactly what we were talking about. Yeah, show me the evidence.
And
But one of the things you bring up a very important point. One of the things that often happens is that people will behave one way in a one-on-one interaction. But when someone sticks a microphone under their face or they're confronted with a crowd of supporters, they'll change their tune. Why? Because they're afraid of losing control. And what are we all afraid of? Control. But let me just say this. Please, 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 if you don't remember anything else I talked about today, please remember this. You do have control. You absolutely have the most important control in the world. We have influence over, certainly like with climate change and other things, over what happens in the world. But things are going to happen. Life is a series of wonderful things punctuated by a series of awful things, followed by a series of wonderful things. It's going to be like that. What we have control over, though, that determines how our lives are, is the way we react to those things. If we remember we have that power, then we are all powerful, because no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. What you have to let go of is, but how am I going to be okay? I don't know yet. I just know I am. And that means I will find my way back to joy.
And what would you say to somebody if they're listening to this begrudgingly, and maybe a couple things resonated, but they're not all in, but they're thinking to themselves, yeah, I felt that way, or that sounds a little familiar. What would you suggest to them?
In terms of?
How to get out, how to go down that path.
Well, okay. Getting out is tricky, because depending on the cult that you're in, you may be impoverished. You may not have any money, or you may be pregnant by the leader person. And so the best thing to do is find family somewhere and say, please help me. I need to get out of here. And they will help you arrange that. In some cases, it's been so bad that people have just gotten out and gone to the police and said, please help me. I don't know what to do. And they've helped them find shelter and, other things.
That makes me want to ask you, there's this big FAFO movement on the internet, mess around and find out. And there's a lot of people who are saying this is not what I voted for, or I made a mistake. And they're getting a lot of hatred online. Yeah. And I get that, right? Because it's like, okay, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, but except we're talking about like humanity, so it's far from stupid. And I understand the instinct to just want to be like, yeah, you idiot, what the hell is your problem? How could you ever believe that? But that is not going to do it.
No.
And so,
No.
As much as we want to berate these people because it feels a little good on some level, because it's usually just combativeness. So I guess on some level it feels a little good, but that's not it. That's not going to, that's part of the reason why I started this podcast, right? And I made sure it was bipartisan as possible, because maybe somebody who's on the fringe will see the logo and want to listen. And I feel like we have to lead with kindness and compassion, even for the people that,
Okay, so let's talk about that. I love that you brought that up. That brings us back to my Mississippis. I used to teach kids how to spell that. Now I teach people how to use that. Okay. The reason why that's so important, back to the brain again, is the amygdala, this emotional center. It's part of the oldest parts of your brain. And it reacts almost immediately to things because its job is to keep you from dying. So be scared of that. Be scared of that. Look over here. Climb the tree. Whatever. Your prefrontal cortex, which is the newest part of the brain, can't catch up. And so if you're thinking from back here, you're going to do some damage either to yourself or to the world, whatever. So if you use my Mississippi plan, when the thing comes and the person says, wow, I made a mistake, and you go, yeah, you jerk, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Okay, they're getting it. That means they're going to vote differently. That means that's going to change the world. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Thank you for being so courageous and sharing your feelings. Anyone can make a mistake. I can understand I've made mistakes. I've done dumb things that I haven't been very happy about. And I so applaud your courage in coming forward and telling your story and what it was like for you. And I really admire you and support you in every way. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your service to our nation and the world.
because that isolationism is what's keeping people in that place. And so if they leave that place and then they're isolated even more, they have no community, they have nothing. That's not gonna help anything. They're more likely to go back or just disengage completely, which is kind of how we got here. You know, my last interview with Frank Spring, you know, he shared with me that on 1 p.m. on the day of the election, the number one most Googled search is, did Biden drop out of the race?
Yep.
Day of the election. So people are already in their own little silos and not even a silo, they're in their own pocket. You know, we're all in our homes looking at our phones.
And one of the biggest Google searches after the election was, who's Kamala Harris?
Just wild to me. It just shows you how disengaged we are as a society, you know?
We like to get in our little comfort places.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The problem is, though, comfort is good. I'm big fan. I love comfort. Okay. But in order for you to grow as a human being, and by the way, decrease your chance of becoming demented when you're older, is to eat well, exercise, and consider novel ideas and have novel experiences. Step outside of your comfort zone. Try different things. Talk to different people. Listen to different perspectives. And it will open a world, and it will open your heart.
Well, that feels like a beautiful place to leave us on. I think hopefully this gave a little insight, because it's easy for people to be upset about the people that are like being hoodwinked by this whole administration. And I think, you know, you really nailed it. It's people looking for, you know, not a savior, but like something to make sense of it all, and some security and some clarity, and this is going to fix all my problems. I mean, that's our society, you know. Like, I'll never forget when that drug came out for people to quit smoking cigarettes. And it was making some people schizophrenic. And I'm like, you know, the other option is you could just not pick up a cigarette and light it. You know what I mean? Instead of hearing voice. There's no easy fix. And I think it's like, you know, people are, like you said, overwhelmed by all the bad things in the world. And they think this guy's going to save them when he's probably the reason why half that stuff exists. I think QAnon is a perfect example. I've never understood people that were so wrapped up in this sex tape thing, but then meanwhile are fans of Trump. You know, it's like, what, you know, like that, I don't, you know, and so it's easy to feel very frustrated. But those people that were really wrapped up in that just wanted to save the kids. And I do believe that. I do believe that they were well intended. I met somebody one time at a party that was all wrapped up in it, and she was a super nice lady with way too much time on her hands and not enough attention at home.
So, be kind to yourself. Dark chocolate if you're not allergic. And don't forget your Mississippis.
Love that. That's the best advice ever. It makes me want to go to the store and buy like 2 giant bars of dark chocolate right now. Well, Dr. Margaret, thank you for coming on the show today. I think this was really, I hope this was helpful. It was helpful to me. It's a good reminder to put things in perspective. You know, try to show kindness and empathy to the people that are, you know, giving you a crack in the door. You know, let's welcome those people back to the other side and try to have some empathy for those that are all wrapped up in it, even though it's really easy to be angry.
Yes. Yes.
Angry ain't
and thank
gonna
you so
fix
much
nothing.
for having me. I had a great time. It was so much fun.
Well, you know, I always like hanging out with you. It's always the highlight of my week. So, you know, I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we're gonna wrap up. We're gonna say until next time. If you found this content valuable, please, you know, share it, leave a review, maybe share it with somebody who could benefit from this information, and maybe help you out a little bit as well. We appreciate all of the followers on Substack and subscribers and everything else. So, thank you. Downloads are cranking. We have another episode coming out with Frank Spring, and then Dr. Margaret's will be coming out, and we have a whole bunch more lined up that we're recording daily. So I'm excited to launch those with you. Until then, please be kind to each other. Remember that, you know, it doesn't seem this way right now, but I think we all, except for the fringe, we all want the same thing. And I don't think any of us are getting it right now. So please be good to each other, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.